Hi everyone, and welcome to our masterclass today on what on earth when we get the idea, I want to write a book. So my beautiful friend and an extraordinary woman who has an amazing experience and lifetime in books in all sorts of different ways, as well as in business. Anjanette is here to talk today. Hey.
Hello everyone.
It's so lovely to have you. So I met Anjanette when we were creating our businesses, and I was exploring what it was to write a book. And we met through our businesses, and then I found out that you had a background in being a literary agent.
Yes, that's the part that everybody finds a little bit extra intriguing, I think.
So I was writing a book, and I was in the overwhelm of, okay, I've written this book, and at the time it was a textbook. It had all come out of my brain, and nothing had come out of my heart. And I thought, right, I have this manuscript of 40,000 words, and someone told me I needed somebody's eyes on it.
Right.
And then I heard you were a literary agent, and I was like, I wonder if that's what I need. So can you tell everybody, one, how you ended up as in books and literary agent, and two, we'll get onto this second bit. Yeah. What on earth are all these special words for people that can help?
Yeah, you know, it is really confusing, and I'm doing my best as part of my business to draw back the curtain a bit on some of those, because as we've talked about before, for me, all of this is it feels almost like common sense, right? So I'll go back to the root meaning of a word to figure out what it means. But I do know that so many of these words are thrown around, and it can be daunting when you are fostering this little flame of an idea or a book, and it's also an incredibly vulnerable time. So even somebody coming to you and saying, you need eyes on your book, you feel like, I don't know that I'm ready for that. So let me make sure I'm ready for that. A little bit about my story. I always think, where do I start? To be honest, I started as a reader, a voracious reader. And something that some of the ladies here might understand is it was actually a very organic process that got me to where I am. I didn't have I didn't go to school for literary agents. There isn't such a thing. There is a new school or a short course to work in publishing.
Oh, wow.
But that's fairly new. I think it's at Columbia. But so my background is actually a degree in psychology. I have always been balancing the reading part with just being a person who likes to be of service.
Yeah.
So whatever that looks like. And the reason once I had the degree in psychology, I didn't go that route is I'm not one that can sit with making money or having my finances depend on somebody else remaining sick, whether that's physically or mentally. And so I really struggled with it. So I couldn't become a clinician because I thought that feels wrong. Part of me will always want them to still need me. So over the years, I just kept facing that decision that a lot of us do, which is, how do I follow my passion? What is my passion? Narrowing it down. And this happened several times. And it was after I'd had quite a bit of experience in all sorts of varieties of industries, filling in those gaps, as I said, one of which was actually copywriting. So I'll give you the definition of that is just writing short bursts of text, right? So rather than painting a picture with paint or pencils, you are painting a picture with words. And that can be anything from sales pages to little snippets describing clothing in, I was going to say catalogs, but we don't use those so much anymore, but on websites, right? You can have longer copywriting. So whether it's business or consumer, blog writing, to be honest, blogging is copywriting, right? It's got more of a storytelling capacity, so we might not relate it, but that's all copywriting is. Writing copy. So I did a lot of that. I did freelance articles for magazines and websites. I had my own idea spark for a book. I didn't know what I was doing, so probably the biggest leap that I made was actually to go through the process that you've been through, learning as I went.
Yeah.
And the same as all the lovelies watching this. So I researched, right, because I had that, I don't know enough about this. And that's good, right? I didn't know enough about it. So I went out and I researched and I put it together. I found my own trusted editor. She wasn't a professional editor, but she worked for a large corporation, and I knew the kind of person she was. I knew she would find the topic interesting, and I knew she'd give it to me straight. So I had her edit the first time. And that's what I would consider a qualified reader as a first editor. And I'm happy to answer questions about that later, because like I said, you have to balance having eyes on it from somebody who's, they love you and they want to please you and they don't want to be too harsh, or they kind of don't get what you're trying to do, so they think they're being helpful, and yet their criticism is not helpful. So that's a whole section of something I try to teach people about. But essentially, she helped me edit it. I started submitting it, had a little lovely spreadsheet. I did research on who to send it to.
So submitting it, you mean submitting your manuscript to a publisher, right?
Well, it feels ancient. To be honest, publishing has gone through some massive changes in a relatively short time. So when was I doing this? Back in 2000, and I was writing it in 2002, 2003, and I probably started submitting firstly to agents, because back then there were kind of two options. There was, you get an agent and you go through traditional publishing, or you pay through the nose for vanity publishing.
Yeah.
Most vanity publishers have fallen by the wayside. There are some still out there, so that's always a warning that I give people. Always have any contract you get checked over. Yeah. And even some of the self-publishing is a little bit like the old school vanity publishing, but there were just basically those two options.
Yeah. That's
how it went. It was finally, some of the feedback I had from the agents was, who are you? It was a book about preconception health. So it's like, who are you to write this? You know, that one fear we have, who am I to write this? They were saying that. And rightly so. It was probably a little bit shorter in those days. It was only 128 pages, and that was really short. In those days, it's a little bit different now for nonfiction, even for a print book. But I had a trusted GP who came on board as a co-author.
Yeah.
She vetted the book, she put in a little section, and now we had an expert. So eventually I got a publishing deal. I published it. Then I was horrified by the quality and all the editing. That's a long story for another time. That's why I have lots of warnings to people about this sort of thing. But having gone through that process, and then I didn't do any marketing for it because I wanted it to fail so that I could buy back the rights. So that's what I did. But with all that learning, I never lost that push to help others. And so I naturally sort of created, I still don't know entirely how, I started building a network of writers, because writers, your most, that writer that you always wished you could be, you know, at the end of the day, he or she is just a human.
Yeah.
And hopefully they're still pretty humble. Most of them are. And so I found it easy to connect with these mostly women. I did some work in blogging early on, and I ended up facilitating a read through of books, including one of Brene Brown's first books. So I've actually gotten the blessing of being on a phone call with her to talk about how to facilitate her the read through of her book. And I just slowly built a world around me where that was what I was going for. I was just before I became an agent, I became a beta reader. So to define that, a beta reader is similar to what I would call a qualified reader. But a beta reader is really at the end and oftentimes works with fiction writers to read the full novel. So some people might call them critique partners. Some people have writers groups that they will do that. But a beta reader, as a beta reader, might assess your manuscript. So they can be paid or unpaid. And I did that unpaid because I was just interested. But again, next little rung up the ladder of creating the life I wanted. I moved back to Australia from the US, and I decided that's it. I'm getting into publishing. And my previous marriage went through a breakdown then, and I got a job at a literary agency.
The breakdown and the breakthrough.
The breakdown and breakthrough. Oh my God. And it was so needed. I just literally in the same month, because the breakdown of the marriage was instantaneous. I was clueless. And then the next month I started working at a literary agency. And I started, they advertised the role as an admin assistant. I was taking any open door. I found the first manuscript that I ended up selling for a 2-book deal in the first 2 weeks that I was there. So I didn't really spend, I mean, I did admin work, but I didn't spend much time doing it. I made it what I wanted. And since then, yeah, I've sold multiple deals to some of the biggest publishers, including one of the largest publishers in the world. And what that job looks like, what a literary agent will do, is read manuscripts, mostly unsolicited. So there's a lot there that doesn't fit with what they're necessarily looking for. And writers might just send out their manuscript scattershot. Like, I just need an agent, I've been told.
Yeah.
So an agent will read a manuscript and pretty quickly assess whether or not they like the voice, whether the writing quality is up to their standard and the standard of traditional publishing, and whether they think they can sell it in 6 months or less.
Yeah.
So if you submit to an agent, you may do everything right and you may have the best book in the world, but if they don't think that they personally know a publisher who's going to buy it in 6 months or less, they only get paid on commission. Mm-hmm. So they are not going to take it.
Yeah.
If the manuscript isn't ready, oftentimes there are fewer and fewer agents who are willing to spend the time to go through another editing process with a writer as well. Some do. The younger ones, the ones that are building their list, they're the ones you want to target. If you, I've got some resources I can pass on to you, Tammy, that you can share.
Beautiful.
Because there's a guy, Chuck, I think it's Sambino, has a whole series on his website that's all about new agents, and they are gold because they are fired up.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't mean it's a definite by any means, but you're more likely to hit somebody there, and somebody who's willing to work with you a little bit and massage your manuscript if it's not quite right for the market yet.
Yeah.
They're willing to put in the time.
That's right. So just to get it clear.
Yeah.
What we describe when we talk about books is that it's a lot like building a body. So when you build a body, you're building the bones. First, you've got the bones, you've got all the major chunks stuck together. And once you've got the body of it, you've then got a structure that allows you to start teasing out other stories and fleshing it out. And then you've got the muscles and the flesh that goes with it. And then you eventually put the skin on it. It all comes together. Once it's all come together, that's the point where you start to talk to other people about it generally. And those other people might be those first eyes, the quality, the editors, and at some point in the building of the body, you could even get a ghostwriter, right? So somebody who might.
I would say this. It's not the easy out. It's not the easy out. So anybody that thinks this is too hard, I'll just get a ghostwriter. Well, I totally get it. It does feel too hard. But if you're in that place, you are so close to your breakthrough. You are so close. You need to stick with it. And also, a ghostwriter has to mine your information. And that takes a lot of time. And you have to get a good fit. So you have to know, are they going to be able to do your voice?
Yeah.
Like a ventriloquist, because it's not their book. So it's not easier. I know some people think, oh, that'll be so much, I'll just talk it and somebody else will do whatever. But the same work that can stop us from wanting to fill in the muscles and the different tissue and the ligament, you know, that stuff that you're like, oh, I wish I didn't have to look at that.
Yeah.
You have to do that either way. And if you're getting a ghostwriter, it means you actually have to tell somebody else right now. So either way, you're going to go through the pain, the growing pains.
Yeah.
Either way, right?
Yeah.
But you're right. Essentially, once you get to that fully formed body, I like to think of editors as helping you get things toned.
Yeah.
You know, getting the muscles in right, and everything's feeling good. Like maybe you go in a little bit. They say this is where we need to change the diet a bit. This is where we're going to take some of these supplements and tighten everything up.
Yep.
The literary agent, once you find a good fit, they look at the body and they go, okay, now let's put some clothes on it. And they're going to put the clothes on that they think they can sell to a publisher. And here's a secret. If and when you do get that golden traditional publishing deal, if that's what you end up wanting, they're going to change your outfit. They're going to tweak it. Maybe if you're lucky, it's just the accessories, but they might totally change the outfit. And they might give you a new name. Like not you, but like the title of the book, right?
Yeah.
So,
and you have to be ready for that, because you know, sometimes it's this big idea of, you know, it's this baby that you've worked on for 9 to 18 months to years for some people, and holding on to that, if you want to get a traditional publishing deal, you got to hold on to it loosely, because they also have a job of getting it out to the market. And getting it out to the market is convincing a publisher that it will be marketable. And
that's right. Well, and they tell you, so you have to trust that if traditional publishing is what you want, the reason you're going for that is not just the exposure because they've got these amazing distribution channels, but because they have the people in the companies that's what they spend their time doing, finding out what's selling, what's not selling, how can we, you know, draft this hook, like what's that. So when people start talking to you in those terms, don't be surprised. What I always say, and what I'm evangelical about, in fact, I found I love the process more than the outcome. Like it's awesome to get a book deal for somebody, but I kind of don't care. I want to be with them during the bodybuilding.
My love is the same. Like I loved writing my book. Like the first bit just all pummeled out of my head. The second bit came out of my heart and opened me up to a level of personal development and a process that I would not have gone through and would not have come through me unless I was actually writing the book. The second it was done and I handed it over to the editor and they kept sending it back and I had to keep doing not my favorite.
Done.
And then
Look,
You were even at my book launch, and I was like, oh, it's just the next thing. Like, it was done.
Yes, yes. Well, and so again, preparing people for that. So enjoy the where you are, even if it feels damn hard or uncomfortable, because it will. But the reason I love it so much is this is the psychology background, I guess. I love helping people through personal transformation. And that's why the writing the book is for the writer. Write out everything. I don't care. Like, sometimes if you do that, it's going to take you more in the editing, but so what? I believe that there's a reason you had to do it the way that you had to do it. And once you finish and you are putting it around for other people, including getting editorial feedback, it's not for you anymore. It doesn't mean take any editing advice somebody gives you if they have a stamped certified super duper editor after their name. Don't care. I do have some qualifications for whether to take it, but it is about being less precious. It is about saying, you know what, I got everything that I really needed, and now it's business, right? So that's also why I say don't rush it, and why ghostwriting, I haven't walked alongside somebody else whilst they went through that process. I know ghostwriters, I know what they go through. It isn't my first choice. It's not a horrible choice, it just depends. But I would say, just like we've discovered, if you iterate a wish, maybe you'll get it. If you write it down yourself, it's more likely to happen. So same with transformation. If you are forced to be present in all different ways, spiritually, emotionally, physically, you're more likely to get there.
Yeah.
And if you've done some of the hard work, wouldn't you rather just do a little bit more and get the benefit of being that brand new, beautiful soul?
What I love about the way that you describe writing books is that it is a medicine in and of itself. And us as practitioners, we don't generally take our own medicine.
Who does? Who does? Yeah.
So even sometimes having the conversations that matter for us is hard to be present to the conversation. And this takes it down a notch to actually write it out, to express. Expressing is such a huge deal for so many people, even to our most near and dear sometimes. But being able to express in a written form and just get that out, whatever comes up, is such a therapeutic thing. And then having that literally out of you, it creates, it's like blocks get moved, or it's like something that was damming up starts to let go, and all of a sudden ideas and thoughts and spontaneity and
I love that
starts to come through.
Okay, so here's a beautiful thing. I usually think of it like we're carrying around these big black bin liners filled with rubbish. And it's documented that therapeutic writing is a thing. I have a whole set of beliefs around how if you're particularly blocked, that we can use fiction to help circumvent the conscious mind that doesn't want to go there, because then you're not, I mean, sometimes maybe you've had this, I've had this, where even though it's a journal, a private journal, no one's going to read, you still cannot get yourself to write the thing that you really think is how shameful it is. And we've got that internal editor nattering away. So the process of writing, in any nonfiction writing, and a lot of fiction writing, is somewhat memoir, which is something that people are compelled to do and also repelled from because of all sorts of things, like, it's not true. Well, there's no one truth, so you're all good. There are all these things that come up, but here's the beauty of it, and it's so amazing that you said that about creating space, and all of a sudden you can be inspired. This happened with one of my most, well, we're still ongoing working together, but one of my most recent clients, a very skilled writer, used to doing more freelance articles and very all together, everything's together, perfectionist, but still really like wonderful. I think she thinks people think she's more highly strung. I didn't think she was, but I just like so competent. And that's probably my ideal kind of client. They tend to be the ones attracted to me are the highly overachieving women, the ones who have it all together. Well, when she first approached me about her idea, look, it was good. But it was so intellectual that I said, well, let's talk about all the ideas you've had. And once she got permission and we worked weekly, because let me tell you, this is therapy. Everything started coming open. So, for example, her main issue with writing a memoir is I have a horrible memory. I have a horrible memory. I can't remember anything. I wish I had such a horrible memory. I mean, I guarantee at the start, because that was the story she was telling herself, the story, I have a horrible memory, means I don't have to bring any of it up. I'm safe from it. But here's the truth. You aren't. You're just carrying that around like all the time. As soon as she started to let it go, about 3-4 weeks into the process, she'd never had an idea for a book, for a story, for a fiction story. Some characters rocked up, just like introduced themselves to her in her head. Why? Because she was creating a space, and it can't, like, this stuff gets spiritual for me.
Yeah.
But even if we look at it just from a very practical viewpoint, if you've got so much stuff, you are holding it so tight, keep it down, don't let that out. People think I'm not qualified if they know that such and such happened, or I had this fear, or blah, 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 blah.
I'm not an expert, or that I'm not enough, or that I haven't got my business together, or I
just haven't got everything together. Right. I haven't got the perfect relationship and the perfect children and the perfect path to everything. And it's especially tied to, because we're almost always motivated to share the thing that we feel weak in, right?
Yeah.
That's the motivator. But then we hit the point where then we get competent at that and we're really good. And then we have to keep it down. Well, what if you're a relationship counselor or coach? What if the shit goes down with your relationship? Now all of a sudden, oh my God, I want to stop being so visible. Maybe I can't say, because what if they know that the relationship person couldn't keep well, hello, 2 people in a relationship. So it doesn't matter how amazing you are. Yeah. You're not in control of another person. But that same thing happens with your health. Well, okay, so a doctor, doctors who smoke, I find that funny. But practitioners of any kind, what if you get sick? What if all the stuff that you've been teaching suddenly seems to not be working? Yeah. Right? That's the time to dive into it privately at first with a trusted whomever, but start writing that down, because the truth is that a story, and I'll give you this as a sort of a handout too, maybe, there are at least 5 points to every story, but anybody that's heard of Brene Brown or watched any of her TEDx talks or anything like that should have heard her talk about the messy middle. The fact is that it's the thing that connects us because it's authentic, it's sincere, it's the truth of where we are, but it's also the thing that we fear sharing because it feels really vulnerable. And we have a wonderful world out there where we see that the loudest voices are either the oversharers, which, to be honest, they're still keeping stuff inside. I can just tell you that. And then the people who make everything like Facebook friendly.
worthy. I
Yes,
get up every morning.
right.
I help all the puppy dogs, and I only eat green
Yes,
stuff.
I only eat the beautiful food that I take photos of. I never ever have the, bulk mass made chocolate that might have some ingredients that I don't even know because I'm not looking. It's like but what I want to know as a consumer, the people that I'm most compelled to follow and take their advice and jump on their train are the people who can be real about how it's been hard and how it is hard today.
Yep.
I figured out all these things. I have all these tools, and sometimes I'm mindless about it. And I have to catch myself and become mindful if I just go on autopilot. So when we're sharing story, if you start to write and you get stopped, this is what I do in my coaching. We will unpack, and I can read it. I can read when somebody backs up energetically from their writing. They can even continue writing. And I'm like, yeah, what happened there? Because you left the room. There's words, but you aren't there anymore. What happened? And those are the places that are the ones we need to jump into. Sharing the whole story, the opening scene, the inciting incident, the dance into denial, the rest of that messy middle battle, then the final battle, and then you have kind of a transformation.
Love it. Say that again.
Okay. I don't know if I have all the words, but you always have an opening scene. There can be more points, but I'm keeping it as simple as possible. There's an opening scene where it's kind of like, where are we now? Then there's an inciting incident. It may be something you've had an inciting incident about before, but it's essentially an inciting incident is a thing you can't unsee or unhear or unexperience, whether it's catching a partner in bed with somebody else, or you're happily in a relationship and then a stranger, for some party kisses you suddenly, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, or a cancer diagnosis. Like, that's a big wake-up call, right? And then the very next thing we do is not magically change for the better. The next thing we do is la 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 la. I know the thing I know, but maybe I can just keep doing what I was doing. Like, I'll just edge over here, but I'm not going to change because that's scary and I don't know how it's going to turn out, right? So you might take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. That's the start of the messy middle that can be long.
And it's
right?
so relatable, and it's so, it can't be all.
It isn't like I had an inciting incident and now right. So then we generally get to a final battle. And the final battle, strangely enough, looks a lot like I'm done battling. I've lost, clearly. This 2 steps forward, 3 steps back thing is not working. I just give up. Like, there's no solution involved. It's just the sit down on the sofa and start eating your pint of ice cream, right? Even if you gave up dairy years ago. Now you're on the sofa eating the ice cream. I give up. And what that looks like in all sorts of different terms is laying down arms and surrendering. The magic is that once we surrender to the fact that we can't force it one way or the other, and we just show up day to day, all of a sudden the solution comes, and that's where the transformation happens. But we have to walk through that process from denial to final battle or surrender. We have to. Like I said, sometimes they're shorter. If we're really mindful and we go, wait, I know what's going on. I know what I'm doing. We're still going to struggle. Right? We're still going to struggle, but inch closer, knowing that the more I let go of the stories and I lay down my arms and I surrender to whatever the hell is happening and just be here, all of a sudden the solution and our personal transformation.
I love that. So what I see in that is not only the process of actually writing a book, you actually go through that entire process writing a book. But on reflection of what you're actually creating within a book, if it has to do with your memoir, if it has to do with the memory of a part of your life, it follows that process as well. And if you look a little bit more into it, Joseph Campbell's work with the heroes.
That's exactly it. Right.
But this is a beautiful distillation of it. I love it.
Well, so that's why I recently bought the domain name Story as Life. Why? Because it is everywhere.
Yeah.
There is no part. Like if I went into a lab with you, I'm sure that you and I could get out our like high-powered microscopes and find it in cells.
Yeah.
We would find that story in cells.
Yeah,
so so the other
like
like literally all of it, everywhere, all the time. So here's the big clue too, and this is my call out to everyone. When you're writing a book, the best way to talk to them, even if you're writing nonfiction and it's very factual, is to have in mind the fact that they personally are going through that same story arc. We all do. And if you lay the information out in a similar way and build and build and build, always keeping in mind where they might be on that journey, they will access it more readily, right? So I love working,
you are essentially talking human to human.
That's right. And if you want them to hear you and really get it, don't stay up here because this is where it's safe. If you really want to pull them in, and I had this experience just this last week reading fiction about what is it? I get really geeky and nerdy about this stuff, Tammy, like all the time.
Love it.
All the time. But I was reading a manuscript that I'm sad to say I didn't like. And I was grateful that I don't attract them. But what it triggered in me was, even as the person that I am and having sold things I've sold and knowing that I can read good story and that I can see and I can fight for it and I know it's good, I have doubt. I can say, like I might say to myself, am I joking myself here now? Am I misleading people? Maybe I don't know what really good writing is. And I read this, so I'm sorry, and I would never say this to someone, so I'm glad she's not waiting for feedback. She's not ready for an agent. She needs way more editing. But the thing that was missing for me is at no point did I fall in to her story.
Yeah.
That's the same whether you're writing nonfiction, fiction, or how-to. We have this sort of, and I'm quite visual, it's like you're getting sucked in, and we've got movies that show that. Why? Because we have that experience.
Yeah.
Emotionally, if not obviously physically, we're not in Jumanji or whatever. But we get pulled into stories.
Yeah.
The way to pull people in is to be sincere and real. And the person you have to start with is you.
Yeah.
You've got to be real about your feelings. So a first draft should be rough. Why? Because you put everything in there that you think might need to go in there. And I have my clients who, if I'm going to be reading their weekly work, I want them to actually write notes to me or to their internal editor. Like, this is the thing I have them do. What's the voice saying to you? Write to the voice in your manuscript, because number one, it guarantees to that little voice inside that's like, oh my God, you're going to write it down and then everyone will read it. Well, there's no magic database that sucks your words off your paper from your computer directly into the publisher in the sky.
Yeah.
Like your first draft will go there. So that's a really good trigger, because then well, this is definitely not going anywhere because I wrote some stuff that's totally not related. But you put everything in it.
Yeah.
And then eventually you edit.
And you put everything in it so that burst can happen. So that
That door has to open.
line there,
Right.
not even aware of yet, can come through.
Right. And the only way, so again, that internal editor, I liken it to a toddler tapping you on the shoulder. What happens if you don't turn and face the toddler? They just get louder and more annoying. They're not going to go away because you say, no, I'm really going to buckle down and not pay attention to them. The opposite will happen. You will give up whatever you're doing because you just can't stand it and probably also have a headache. So that internal editor is the same. And I say, rather than ignore it, turn to it and say, I hear you. Or what do you have to say to me? Because they are your access to all the gold. Literally, it feels like they're fighting you, but they're kind of the gatekeeper. And as soon as you say, it's safe and I will actually listen to you, they think, oh my God, it's, rally the troops. It's time to come tell her all the stuff. We're going to give her the memories. All of a sudden you go from, I have a horrible memory. I can't remember anything from when I was younger. And now all the memories come out. Why? Because you said, it's safe. I will totally listen to you. Yeah. Even if it feels unrelated and gibberish, I'll write it down. I will write it down. You're safe. Right? It's magic. It's magic.
And so this is the thing. When we come to writing our first book, and we're all so excited, and we want it to be perfect, and we want it to be picked up by Hay House.
Yes, it's Hay House that everybody wants to be picked up. Well, at least from a certainly large segment of the world, Hay House is the one.
So, what are the three things? I know my first one is, it's not perfect from the start, and it's probably not going to be perfect at the end. So just let go of the fact that your first book in particular is just not going to be perfect, let alone any book.
Yeah.
There is no perfection in it.
Yeah.
That would be my thing. But what are your three things that you would go, okay, this is the guidance that
Yeah. So, well, I'll go from what do people that I think are in that space, like it's my first book, I'm excited. Generally, one of the first things that they ask is, or they'll say is, I've got a few ideas. Which one do I go for? There's always the idea somebody else has told them they have to write about. There's and that could be personal or whatever. Somebody said, oh, that's so good, you write a book about that. Somebody else, like a marketing expert or some sort of business coach or strategist, says, write this, or it's time for you to leverage your business. And I'm not disparaging any of this, by the way, because it's totally true. It's just not always in the same order as what I've discovered works for creativity. But it's like, this is the one tied to my business. This is the one I should write. And then there's the other one, the one that's in there, but gets the loudest yelling over it from that internal editor going, but you can't do that. You're not qualified. You were never good in English class. Don't you remember what Mrs. Smith said back in year 4? Like you can't. Okay. So like most of the people that come to me, whether they are what I call a writer's writer or a business writer, they will have several ideas. And some of it is actually a proven thing. Like when you go to a therapist and they say, why did you show up here today? And people have multiple things on the list. And the real reason is either the first or the last, often the last. So what I help people unpack is getting real with themselves about the one they're most motivated to write. It may not be published, but you really have to go back inside, and this can be even a get in touch with your body sort of thing, like we were talking about, because some of the process of being able to be clear in anything that we're communicating or expressing means we have to offload the other stuff. Sometimes it's that deep, dark, secret past. Offload that first, and then maybe you can get to the more intellectual and, oh, I know exactly how I'd market this, and that's perfect. But writing is hard. That I'll just full stop. End of sentence. Writing is hard. And so you don't want to do the one that you're actually giving yourself more work, because energetically you're not motivated to do it. You're doing it because it makes good sense.
Yeah.
I've seen it time and time again. I can't say that as a coach, every single person who's come to me has finished their book. Why? Because I didn't write it.
Yeah.
I don't write any of their books. They have to. And if they're not ready, I'm good at sensing how tightly they're holding on. And if they're not willing to look at the stuff that they talk about a lot, and I say, oh, that's interesting, you're talking about that, but you say you're going to write this. And so I'll go through some different things to suss out which things should they approach first. If they don't walk through the door that they've opened, I can't do anything. And you and all the lovelies watching this will have had that experience. Here's someone, they say they're ready. They've had that inciting incident. They are ready. And then they're freaked out. So they'll go, no, the problem's over here. I don't really have to do that. I just have to stop eating the palm oil chocolate. It's not all the other, I don't have to just change all these other things. So what I would say is find a way for yourself, because people don't need me to do it unless they need me to do it.
Yeah.
But we do all have the guidance. So I don't have anything really that nobody else has, but I help them. So I'm kind of a midwife in that way. You know yourself. And if you're ready to walk the walk and feel like you've got enough safety, I get into chakras with this, is how crazy we go. If you're out of the red zone, if you've got your safety taken care of, or maybe you're a psych person and you love Maslow, well, if you're off of that bottom part of the pyramid, then you can do this writing. You can know yourself, and you should choose the one that will come out the fastest.
Yeah.
Whether your fastest is 10 months or 10 years, I don't know, and I don't care. But my experience personally was having written a book and I did all the things and I wrote all the words. If you're not happy at the end, I mean, hopefully you got something out of it, because you're not going to promote it. Yep. So you can write all the things that people want you to write, and how much will you be fired up to promote it? Not at all, right? And you had a similar experience. I won't say it's exactly the same.
Yeah, I did.
Because it's just like, oh, that's where I was, but I wasn't fully surrendered yet. Yeah. So it's like your book was almost like a half and half, right? Yeah. And you had to go through more, and that's okay. I mean, most writers who are published by traditional publishers would go, nobody mentioned those first couple of books. Like, don't talk about those, please.
That's right.
You're right.
But those ones have to come so that the rest
can come. So you have to do it. But if you have multiple ideas, the trick to figuring it out is to really listen, and you can listen to your body, because your body will tell you. You'll feel it in there. But make it not an intellectual decision. Make it more of a heart decision. And if I had to guess which one, it's going to be the one you're most afraid to start with. Yeah. And here's the other trick. If you start one, guess what? Permission to switch. If it doesn't work out, and you go, oh, I really thought this was the one I was afraid, but I just keep yawning and going to sleep. Nobody wants to read that. Like, I don't care what you're writing. If you are yawning and falling asleep, get your body up and go do
and
something.
The energy comes through in your writing, right?
Oh my God.
It's not like...
Yeah, you can. So here's a really good example, especially for those writing nonfiction. There's a funny thing I've noticed, and some of the advice I often give is write your introduction first. And I have a certain structure that I have writers write their introduction. It's you want your why, and you give a promise, and then you provide your plan for how you're going to do it. And I want you to do it first. Why? Because you're most likely to be fired up and present for the writing. Now, almost everyone has an experience where a writer they really like, and if you're a geek like me, I like reading the intro. Why? Because I want to know more about the person. I want to know the story behind the story. It's why we like behind the scenes stuff. Have you ever read something that you were like, oh my God, if I didn't already know this writer, I would not keep reading the book because I'm so not connecting with it. I'm going to skip it. Like, so you start an intro and then you stop reading it because it is so bleh. They wrote it at the end. That's the clue. They were not in the room anymore. Like, oh, I've written the bulk of the book and now, oh, I've got to have an intro. So here, I'll just write an intro. Or I'll get somebody to help me write an intro. They're new. They haven't spent all these weeks or months writing it. So they might be fired up. So somebody else has written the intro for them. That might be interesting if that person is in the room while they're writing it. But do you know what I mean? It's funny. Somebody said, oh, at totally random, my husband had been reading me snippets of this Eckhart Tolle book and I loved it. So then he recommended, I went out and I got this other new book and I started in the intro and I was like, ugh. I said, stop reading the intro. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, go to the stuff you like because it's not his fault. It's just how it is. Yeah. But that's why my advice is the opposite. And actually, even that exercise, especially for nonfiction books, if you can't make your way excitedly kind of through writing the intro, put the rest of the project on park. Because as you said, that energy is injected. And so this is another trick. If your energy is right on, even if you cut out half of what you wrote because it was rubbish, if the energy was right, it remains. But it's not impossible, but way harder to come back and inject energy in an edit because the first draft is water. It's flow. It goes this way. The edit is oil. They don't mix so well.
Yeah, I like that.
So one is heart and one is head. And I'm going through that process with someone writing fiction. It's so much slower. It's much more fraught. It's not as easy. It's not impossible. But if you can save yourself some time later, why don't you do it the right way the first time? And the right way is to show up and be there with it.
And flow, So, can you tell us how what you do now, and how people can get into contact if they get to the point where they're like, oh my goodness.
Yes, I hope everyone does. And so, where people see me, so I've worked at all different stages of the process, but I would say that my fave, as I've said, is when somebody's still at the idea point, and that could be they've written 5,000-10,000 words and they feel a little bit stuck or they need reassurance. So I work with people whether it's just on something that I call a breakthrough book strategy session, which is generally 2 hours, and I'll read a certain amount of writing that they've had thus far. But it's also great for people who want to make sure that they're getting feedback just on the advice, on structure. So I have a lot of people come to me with, oh, here's the outline, and I've written a bit. And what we can do during that time is we just get laser focused and figure out, based on how people read, how do we need to deliver this information? And if I see any gaps, I help fill them, and then they can go off on their way if they're highly motivated. I also work with authors from concept to completion. So that could be still the 5,000, 10,000, maybe. I had somebody who had 133,000 words, or sorry, pages, 133 pages. It took her a year to write that. Like, I can't stress this in a highly overachieving CEO woman. She took a year, and that was slow to her. Well, in 8 weeks, 5 trips from the US to Germany, and single mother to a 17-year-old, she wrote 350 pages in those 8 weeks. So something happens when you've got someone on your team. And I know that anyone working with you would know that from their own experience. I don't crack a whip. I don't need to, thank God, because I would be horrible at it. I just show up, and they show up for themselves. So the breakthrough book strategy session, I think, is like $497, and like I said, it's 2 hours. There's a pre-questionnaire, and there's a bit of reading. that I'll do beforehand, but I'll be honest, when it comes to boundaries, I have no boundaries around email. So it's generally unlimited email. I will keep talking to you. But it's limited on the one-to-one sort of coaching.
Yeah, because like you described before, it's like being a midwife. You've got
That's right. That's right. And so sometimes you need more assistance because the labor is taking a hell of a lot longer. And sometimes all you need is to get unstuck. Yeah. Generally, I would say if I go concept to completion, the shortest period of time would be 3 months. Now, 12 weeks, you can finish, obviously, like that other, you can finish a manuscript. It really depends on how close to surrender you are and how willing you are to have that balance. Like you were saying about building a body. Well, in story, we do start with structure. You have to have some, because you have to have an idea of where you're going, but not too much, because we don't want to decide what the baby looks like, all the little details. Some of it is the magic that needs to unfold. So we start with a little structure, and then you can really go and have ahas, like this happens, and that's why I love it. So generally 3 months gets it. Every now and again, there might be somebody who needs a 6 months, but I always start with a 3 months because I'd rather have us have that as a target and let things unfold. And yeah.
Where can people find you?
I am updating my website always, but you can find me for a very basic website at anjanettefennel.com. Hopefully you'll have a link that they can go to.
There is a link around here. Just want to make sure that we've got.
Yes, that's the best one. I'll be transitioning to the literary agent part now, just to let everyone know.
Yep.
I have a closed book. I have a very boutique agency, so I'm not actually accepting any people at the moment. But to be honest, you can get a hell of a lot done just with chatting. So I also have general consultation that I'm sure is under the work with me. Yep. But I'm also really straightforward with people about what each of the processes, traditional or self-publishing, take, the pros and cons. There's no one right answer for every writer, and there's no one right answer even for every book. You really have to take them like, what is the dream for that baby? What's the dream? What do you need it to do? And even if you approach traditional publishing, there's nothing to say that you can't then, okay, well, this is the time I'll give it, and then I'll fall back. So I think that starting where you are rather than dreaming about your Oprah moment is the best thing to do.
Agreed.
And so, yeah, start there.
Beautiful.
Hold your dreams, but don't let them stop you from taking those first steps, because it's amazing.
Beautiful. Amazing. It's such a beautiful journey to be on. And I am so, so grateful for all the gold nuggets that you've shared with us today. Thank you so, so much. And if you are watching, whatever gold nugget you got out of today, if you can just take one action on that, rather than thinking it's a nice idea, just take one action on that and see where it takes you. So thanks, Anjanette.
Yay. Thank you. It's so good to be here.
We'll see you in the next vid.